Hi, Kristine. It's so great to be in your presence today. Welcome to your all women lead in the do component of our last virtual uh, event. This is a big one. Your pre-interview. How is it going today?
It's going well, thank you. I'm very excited to be here. I have seen some incredible women do this before me, and I'm just really excited to participate.
Wonderful. It's great to have you here. I've been fascinated by your work. I know we had a few moments to chat before this interview, and I'd already mentioned this to you. So I can't wait to dig into learning a little bit more about you and your work. So, I mean, this is a great opportunity. Can you provide us with a bit of a self-introduction? Who is, and can I have you say your last name for me?
Beezy rhymes
Beese.
with easy.
I like it. I
Actually,
like it.
how do I pronounce your first name? Mojdeh?
Mojdeh.
I wasn't even close.
That's
Mojdeh.
okay. This is why we asked. So thanks so much, Kristine. So who is the real Kristine Beese? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I've had a really varied path in getting to where I am today. And I think it's really neat because I think each of the components really built towards getting me to untangle money. So I started in a non-traditional way. I actually dropped out of high school to figure skate full time at a national level. And from that experience, it really gave me this grit and this understanding that you sometimes have to iterate and fail 1,000 times before you get there. And that can just be a very tricky thing to learn. So I'm glad I have that experience behind me. And I then went back into night school, got my degree in engineering. And at the time, the degree I had was hired by Nortel. And the only reason I bring this up is because it explains why I didn't stay in my first career. Nortel went bankrupt just before I graduated. And so the only place there were jobs really in engineering in any size was oil and gas out in Calgary. So I became an engineer in oil and gas out in Calgary. And fortuitously, I landed with these men who had built the industry. And I was their first junior hire, and I had to start a company to do it. And I had all this work, all the work that they did, grunt work that they didn't want to do. And I had more work than I could do. And I had all these amazing friends back home who were looking for jobs. And so I just paired the two, right? As I got more and more work, I just hired the incredible friends, like cherry picked, right? Do you want to come out and work with me? And so I made a lot of money. But I wasn't, again, I didn't go to school for oil and gas engineering. I was more of an environmentalist. So I had conflicting values in the inside. And I made all this money. I went to the bank, and the gentleman there made me feel really small. He made me feel like my questions weren't valid. He made me feel like I just wasn't able to understand what he was saying. And I thought, maybe I can do maybe I'll do your job, right? I don't like my job. Like, and I had gotten my PN. I feel like I had completed that chapter. And so I went off and I got my MBA, and I worked on Canada's largest trading floor, and I became a stock analyst covering oil and gas. So that was a really nice tie-in. And then I had a bunch of kids. And I did that in Canada and then in London, UK. And when we came back to Canada, I started managing money for wealthy Canadians. And so, my friends would say, "Hey, you invest money for a living. Can you invest my money?" And I said, "Well, I wouldn't say this, but in order to invest with the company I worked for, you had to write us a check for at least $1 million." And that's how unattainable, like having an expert in the space work for you is. And so, later that becomes important. But I just remember feeling a little bit like even I wouldn't be able to invest in our fund, except that there's an employee loophole. So if you are the investor, you're allowed to put your own money in. And so I had some more children. I now have three boys. And my friend came to me and said, "Kristine, I don't think my relationship is working out with my partner. I'm not sure I can afford to leave. I don't know what the legal fees are going to be, and a financial plan costs $2,000 that I'm just not comfortable spending. Can you help?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so that's where Untangle Money came from, and that's where wanting to help average women who can't access wealth management came out of. And I looked at my friend who's brilliant, wonderful, warm, hardworking, and she had no access to this type of better help, and I just wanted to fill that gap. So I leveraged, the tenacity from figure skating. I leveraged the engineering and trying to redesign, because when we took FP Canada's standard thing, it didn't work for middle income women. So we ended up, what are the answers we want? What is the information we have? How do we get there? So that really took my engineering and iterative design thinking. And then, the financial acumen came in a lot of in handy,
It came in
um,
handy.
to do all the other things. But that's really why I think I'm the right person to do this, and why I think all of the places when I thought maybe I was in the wrong space or it didn't quite fit, it actually ended up being additive to where I am today. So I leverage all that. So it's really nice.
I can't imagine. Thank you for that. I can't imagine. I didn't know the figure skating side of your story, so this is new information for me. Now I'm even more obsessed with you. Thanks, Kristine.
Well, if it makes you
I've
feel
been
better.
diving into your work so hard over the last few days that now I'm like, add so much more to my admiration for the way that you make things clear and build confidence along the way. I think, and just judging by your reaction now, I think that's what you're going for.
Yes.
That story that you share about going to the bank, it's so relatable.
So right.
Um, it's so relatable. So I can't wait to hear a little bit more about you on our official virtual event. There's still time to grab your tickets, folks, and register to witness and receive this wisdom. So I can't imagine. So before I got into this tangent, I was gonna ask you to tell us more about that moment where you had to make, not had to, but you made that really brave, that courageous decision, and you name it your, that was your other career. So
Yeah.
tell me, what was, you named the ethical alignment, you named where your own personal experience tied into what you were doing now, not at, or at least at that time, not serving you in the way that you wanted it to. So tell me more about that moment of pivot, because it's so daunting. I've
The pivot.
experienced it where
Yeah.
you make a pivot to a different area of work. And so I want to know what your pivot moment felt like, if you
Yes.
can.
The one from engineering to finance.
That's
Yeah.
it. That's the
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, so I went into it. I often have two paths at the same time. Best case scenario, worst case scenario, because otherwise I sometimes get paralyzed. And so my best case scenario, I just thought I was going to make a fantastic trader. I read a bunch of books about being on the trading floor, and I can I can hyper focus. I love not like moving charts. I love days. They describe it as every day is different. And I was like, I love that. I thrive in those environments. And, I thought I was going to be really good at it. So that was like best case scenario, but it's really hard to break into capital markets. It's even harder to break into the trading floor, and then there weren't very many seats because we had just experienced the financial crisis. So it's one of the hardest years to get in. So that was best case scenario. This happens. Worst case scenario, I have a growing business and I don't have the skills to man, I'm struggling, right? I don't have a business background. I had realized that engineering is a tool used by strategy and operations and other things. I was just learning about my place in the giant machine. And worst case, I'd go back and I'd have all this acumen to build my business and hopefully maybe even pivot it more from engineering into more strategy, like, what, how to be operationally efficient, how to have more. That was whenever we had those jobs come in, those are the ones that lit me up on the inside. So I wanted to, that would strengthen my positioning to take on more of that work. So I wasn't doing as much of the work that I didn't enjoy. So either way, I felt like it was a winning opportunity. And, at that time, the school had a 1 year option. You could do an MBA 1 year. So it felt like the opportunity cost wasn't going to be that daunting.
Okay.
And it just, it, I think, or I believe when you've done the inner work and you've sort of blocked off what you're hoping to get out of it, and then what the worst case scenario is going to be, and you're still okay with that, then the decision's easy. It's more when the worst case is something that's not palatable and you're like, that would really, I would really be uncomfortable with that. That's when the decision's harder, because it's in the spectrum of possibilities. But like everybody's going to pick the upside one all the time. And it just happened to work out that I got a job, and it was actually quite fortuitous. I had very little to do with some of the things that I had learned. It had a lot to do with the fact that somebody that interviewed me also was a figure skater with the same coach, and she had done it about 10 years before me. And
What
these
are the
things happen.
odds?
It very small, and
What?
every other bank said no. So
I can't
it's just,
even.
yeah.
It was meant to happen then. It's
It was,
just that it was the
but
right
I also
time.
want to say that because when in the second year, when I was part of the recruitment, they ask you to go back to your school, they ask you to help with resumes. I got a resume stack this big. I had half an hour to go through it, and they were all exceptional candidates. And so it's really challenging and so I just want for people who have maybe tried to get into a job opportunity and it hasn't worked out, please know that it can be very hard to be on the other side, and that chances are you were a very strong candidate amongst many, and for whatever reason, whatever. I saw one guy, he just threw them in the air, and the first five he picked up. Once he made base level, like all these people are good.
Yeah.
He just didn't want to deal with, having to select or bias, or he just, threw them in the air, picked up five, and there you go. It can be really hard.
Wow. Those are very good lessons. I'm telling you, my goodness. Appreciate you sharing that. Okay. So there's more to come from your story. You're going to be telling us a lot more about your lessons in leadership and your journey and why you do what makes you tick, why you do what you do. I can't wait. Now I want to get to know you on a different level. I do this lightning round with all of our pre-interviews, and it's sort of a this or that game. So don't overthink it. Whatever speaks to you first. Okay, ready?
No.
You'll get through it in 6 questions. It's easy.
All right.
Super speed or super strength as a superpower?
Super strength.
Pen and paper or tablet and stylus?
And in paper, old school.
Coffee or tea?
Ooh. Coffee in the morning, tea at night.
Same. Early bird or night owl?
So before children, night owl. Now they get up early, so I'm an early bird. It's not by choice. So night owl naturally.
Oh, so relatable. Mountains or beaches?
Mountains.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Nonfiction for knowledge expansion. Fiction, I call it bubble gum to disconnect and recharge. So fiction for fun, but I love nonfiction as well. It's great, but it feels more like work.
It feels like
I
work.
pick nonfiction.
Aha, nonfiction. Bubblegum it is.
Bubble
Bubblegum
gum.
it is. Kristine, you are a delight and so full of wisdom. I cannot wait for your full talk, a full 10 minutes without my jibber jabber in the mix. So I'll focus on you. Can't wait to hear your message. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you then.
I can't wait. See everybody soon.
Take care. Thanks.